Hey Adam, why don't you do something loud or put in your headphones? But you can still hear me, right?
Barely.
Turn them up.
Okay.
Okay. Because it makes me feel weird.
Okay.
All right. Now I can talk about him. The thing about my husband is, he is so... Did you hear that?
Were you saying something to me? I can't hear you.
Never mind. Never mind. You heard me! Don't!
I really can't now.
I'm going to have a martyr attitude the whole time I do this. Dear friends, thank you for gathering with me today. This is my so-called Handmade Life podcast. I'm Michelle. I have a blog by the same name, and I'm my so-called Handmade Life on Instagram and Mamatronic on Ravelry. This is all scattered, and it's just going to be. I didn't think I would even get this done before my son graduated, but I'm just taking the time when everybody really needs to eat. I'm sorry. My dog always gets right under the tripod, and then he starts licking and bumping the leg, and I don't notice it until I'm reviewing it, like editing, that the camera is just shaking, and that's him. He does this incessant licking thing. Anyway, that was important for you to know. Yes, he's graduating, and I didn't think I would get this done before that, but everybody's being patient with supper, and I'm just going to hurry and kind of squeeze this in because we've been talking about some things. Like, I kind of took a break from it last week to talk about my trip and kind of what we've been discussing with just slow living, the whole simplifying our life and kind of getting down to what's important. I didn't want to put that off another week because I've been learning some new things and I wanted to share it, and a bunch of you have commented, and it's just, these comments are collecting. I need to talk with you about it before it's just, going to be a 3-hour episode. So first, I wanted to thank Teresa, Samantha, and Inga for wishing me well on my trip. I really appreciate that. You've already seen the last episode maybe. I'm back, I'm fine, but I do appreciate your kind thoughts. Let me talk, before I forget, about the tops, tanks, and tees knit along. I told you I was doing that, and I think one or two of you maybe more have joined in. It's kind of late to join in now, but I don't think it's too late. Some people can knit a summer top, easily in a week. You don't have to finish by the deadline, though. This is more about just knitting together. It's in the Very Shannon group on Ravelry. And I have links for everything I talk about. It will be in the notes under the window, the video window. So I was doing Zara by Deanna, I don't know if it's Walla or Walla. I don't know how she pronounces her name, but you've seen her designs. I know she does lots of really great color work designs. So I did my Zara, almost finished. I just have a little bit of a sleeve left to do. I did this in Knit Picks Lindy chain. It's so covered in white dog hair, so you're just going to see a lot of dog hair. But I don't know if you can tell, it's really airy. Makes an airy fabric. You see? And this knits up. It's not too bad. It's cotton linen blend. It's not like pure linen. That's really hard, I think, to get a good rhythm with my hands. It's knitting up fine. I thought that it would be kind of extra long. I actually added an extra stripe repeat. And you can see there are these purl vertical lines. That is where I'm going to come back in with crochet and this linen color and do the full box print. It's like kind of like a plaid or oh, there's a word for it, I can't think of it. Window pane, a window pane kind of effect. And so there'll be vertical stripes, like 4 vertical stripes across the front. Actually 6, 6 vertical stripes, because one will go all the way out to on each side, close to the sleeve. So I added 1 extra repeat of this, the stripe and the space underneath, and I thought it would be really long, but actually, because this is a different yarn than the recommended fingering weight, and just, you know, my tension, it actually has ended up being cropped after all, but it's cute. I ran into one problem, but I just made it a design element. I knit my front and my back piece, and somehow, even though I know I counted my rows, I was really careful, the back is longer than the front, or one piece was longer than the other. So I just left a little split hem, and I made it a high-low effect. It's kind of messy with all the ends not woven in, but it actually fits really well. And I'll have it finished by next week. I mean, I'll have this finished tomorrow. And then I'll have to weave in ends and do my chain stitch for my window pane, you know, vertical lines. But I think it's going to be a keeper. I think I'm going to enjoy it. And I did wash something in Lindy chain the other day. I accidentally put it in the washing machine. I normally hand wash even things that are supposed to be machine wash and dry. Linen, I know that I can machine wash it, but I usually don't. But I did accidentally, and there was little bits of fluff, you know, that kind of came off of it, but it's okay, it looks good. So I think this will be fine. And for this, I did have to block the body before adding the sleeves. So the sleeves actually aren't blocked, but they're not going to change shape. I'm not going to worry about anything. They fit just fine, and they come to right about here. So that went really well. And while I was knitting the body, I'm sorry, waiting for the body to block, I don't know why, I really want to do some winter sweaters, even though it's basically summer here. But I cast on for Andrea Mowry's May pattern, and I actually got like this far through it, like through all of the short row shaping, because it has a high-low hem, and it was just too big. So I reduced my needle size. I'm using sport weight instead of DK yarn, and it's Barocco Remix. I don't know if you can see that. It's just kind of a green, tweedy, nubby looking, and it's all recycled materials. It's 30% nylon, cotton, acrylic, silk, and linen. And it's got a soft feel to it, but I knit a size larger than I normally would because I was using a size smaller in yarn, and it was still too airy. The fabric wasn't good. It's not supposed to have that mesh look to it. So I had to rip it all back and start over. And this is just kind of, I don't know when I'm going to do it. It's not really TV knitting because there's too much, changing between knits and purl stitches. Let me, I'll flash a picture of what May is supposed to look like on the screen, but you've all seen it, I know. So the tops, tanks, and tees, hang on, let me get something. I wanted to show you one of the things I learned about in this knit along. I always learn something every single time I do the tops, tanks, and tees knit along or the summer sweater knit along. This time, I first learned, I knew about helix striping, but I never really thought about it in using a sweater. I guess maybe socks or cowls or something. I learned it from Vera Valmaki at a class she was teaching in Fort Worth. But the helix striping would be basically the method I looked up. Say for, I'm not striping, let's just say I'm alternating skeins of the same color, say on my Sunset Highway. And it made kind of a tight line up the back of my sweater. It was okay. I knew to leave it pretty loose, but I would rather not have had that. And that method would be right before it's time to switch, to alternate to your next skein. You stop like 3 stitches before, and because I magic loop, 3 stitches before, and you just slip those 3 stitches and you start with the new yarn. And you go all the way around, and when you get 3 stitches before, you would do, you would switch. You know, you get to where you began that yarn, you start with the old one, and that would have made much more sense, and I wish that I had known that when alternating skeins. The next time I do a project like that, because I think Caitlin Hunter has some other yarns that, some other projects that I would want to do, or there's plenty that I want to do with hand-dyed yarn, and I would be alternating skeins. That's a good idea for them. So the other thing I learned about was this, this try-it-on tubing. It's actually plastic tubing, and you can get it in different sizes to fit different needles, that you can put on the end of your needle. Let me see if that's going to show up. Put on the end of your needle, and it just extends the size of it greatly. So say I was knitting around on my Zara, it was way too small, or the May. If I'd had this when I was doing that, I would have seen, yuck, this fabric is terrible. But it was all squished around on my 32-inch needle, and I was just knitting away. Well, I can just stick this on one end, stick this on the other, and spread that sweater out and try it on. I love this idea. Really smart. Somebody suggested it in that Tops, Tanks, and Tees Knit Along, and it's very affordable. It's like $5 for the tubing at the right size. And yeah, I ordered some because I'm done with ripping back half a sweater. I'm just really tired of doing that. So that was something I learned about. And then the other thing, often Heather will ask a chat question, like, what is some summer reads? We've done that a few times, and I hear a lot of good suggestions. This year, several people were reading Educated. I really don't know anything about it, except that it's a woman's memoirs, and apparently she and her siblings remember their childhoods completely different. And I found that really interesting, the idea of how we can grow up in the same home, same parents, same situations, and yet view our parents, their decisions, our lives, everything about our childhood very differently. I'm interested in reading that. Another that was recommended was a science fiction book. I think it was called Android's Dream of Sheep. So it's a play on that Philip K. Dick book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I don't know what the storyline plot is about at all. They were just two that I thought, I'm interested in that at some point, so I wish listed them on Amazon. But I'm going to link in the notes about a couple of lists that two of our Knit Along members came up with. One, she just got busy and wrote out a doc of all the books all of us were reading. So the other is a list found online of some of the great classics, and of course some of them are new and they're not classics, but they're considered top reads in America. I've read it was like 100 books, but some of them represent a series, so not thinking about the series thing, I probably read 25 of them. But you guys, you know how we were talking about keeping things we don't need or we think our ideal self will want? There were 14 books on that list that I actually own and have never read. I told you when I went through my home, straightening out my bookshelves and things, that I kept some, thinking, okay, if in the next year I start working on those that I haven't read, I'll keep them. And I'll keep working on them till I'm done. But if I see after a year I haven't read any of them, they go out. Well, I still want to do that. So I'm thinking I'll start with Beloved by Toni Morrison. Have never read it. All of them I am now still interested in, except a couple. I never really bought Moby Dick. My husband did. I'm not interested in reading Moby Dick. Also, Ayn Rand, I read 2 of her books. I don't want to read Atlas Shrugged. I think 2 books and writing a research paper on her and reading several autobiographies about her, not autobiographies, just biographies about her was plenty. I'm done with Ayn Rand, but the rest of them I'm still interested in. So that gives me a little something new to try this summer, which is something we're going to talk about today. So, I'm sorry if I sound like I'm rushing. I hear dishes clinking and I feel neglectful of my responsibilities. The update on the simplifying at my house. Actually, I still have that drawer and like 2 or 3 shelves to go through, but the drawer will happen before our company comes, maybe the shelves too, for my son's graduation. What I did take care of was some business, some last things I needed to do for my grandmother's kind of estate, some loose ends tying up for her. It was just obnoxious dealing with insurance companies and claims, and I think I finally, it's been a year, it's been ridiculous. I think I've finally taken care of that. So I felt wonderful about getting that done. I also opened a CD that I had been wanting to open. I felt just great about those things. I got my son's senior pictures done before I went on my trip, and his invitation's out earlier than a lot of my friends. I was surprised. And I've made this isn't really, it is organizational. I've made a commitment to try not to be late when I go places, which I was usually at least 5 minutes late everywhere. And for about 2 weeks, I have not been late anywhere. So that's great. I mean, more than 2 weeks if you count. When I was gone, I had nowhere I had to be. So I was on time the whole time. A lot of you are taking the idea of editing to heart. Amber, who's Yarn Junkie, she has her podcast, which you've probably seen it. It's a good podcast, and she has a new little baby. She took time, she said, while she was watching one of my podcasts where we were talking about kind of editing and decluttering our lives. She just paused it right there, and she went and started editing. And she went through like stuff like a sock drawer where she had socks that the pair is mismatched. There's one sock is missing. It's not hidden somewhere. She's never going to have it again, or maybe it was messed up. Why keep just one sock without a mate? Things like that. She just kind of organized. And but she also had said, like, she really appreciated my non-consumerism attitude. I appreciate you saying that, Amber, but I am not like the bastion of non-consumerism. I'm pretty good about doing things natural and not overspending. I like being frugal, but like I've said before, the crafting stuff is really hard for me to say no to. I'll do really well for a while, and then, And when I say I mess up, it's not like I'm spending money I don't have, but I'm spending money I don't need to spend on stuff I don't really need, or that can wait. It's still a struggle. So don't think I've got it all, fixed. I don't. It's my weak spot is the crafting. But the more time I have to put into it, I think the better it will be to finally have that time. And I mean, I'm there. I'm pretty much there. Things have really slowed down this last week before my son graduates. And then we'll have a busy week next week with graduation. And then we do project graduation where they stay up all night. We'll help with that. But then he's going on a trip with his friend's family. And it's just going to be summer here. Officially summer, and I'm going to take some time this summer to keep up my good habits that I've already started in the last year, since having more time to myself, trying to eat right, be more active. I'm going to keep all of that up, plus try some new things. Like I said, one will be reading some of these books that I've wanted to read for years. So anyway, Cameron also has been going through her drawers and things, and she actually said, like even dishcloths, she's way too many. Why do I need all these dishcloths? So she got rid of them. That was the type of organizing I did a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago. But she said she actually has an empty kitchen drawer. I can't imagine having an empty kitchen drawer. We are so short on space in our kitchen. Our dishwasher will be going out eventually. I mean, we could repair it, and that's what I was talking with my husband. I don't want to just, what happens to appliances when you upgrade? I mean, talk about waste, just sitting in a landfill, rotting. It can't really be stripped for parts easily. Nothing good happens with that. But I talked to him about maybe we could just repair it, keep it going as long as possible. But the truth is, especially when our son isn't living with us, I can hand wash and dry dishes. That's what we used to do. It was pretty meditative. So I don't know what we'll do. But I did think if we took that dishwasher out, I could have extra shelving under the counter for like my Instant Pot, things like that don't easily fit. Some of our like coffee makers, our French press and tea press. But I don't know what we'll do. I kind of wonder what you guys do as far as those of you who are really committed to not creating waste. You probably don't even use things like dishwashers, but let's say you have it. Do you keep stuff going as long as you can, repairing it? We did that with our washer and dryer. Really, all of these appliances that we had were about 18 years old or older. So that's a pretty long time to keep things. But like, you don't need a washer and dryer. You can, washer is much easier. But a dryer, you can hang things to dry. It's gross to hang things here. There's like a refinery behind my house, and stuff doesn't smell so great after it's been hung. But we can string a line in the garage or something. We did get a new washer and dryer though. However, I just wonder what you guys do. Do you try and keep things going on their last leg? We do that with cars, most of our things. So Triple S said that they're stripping things down too, just trying to kind of shave off the excess and live more simply. It was just sort of a thumbs up kind of comment. And then T. Vernon always buys used when possible, used clothing, and only buys clothing when there's a real need. And when moving, I don't know if T. Vernon is a man or a woman. I'm going to guess a woman. When moving, she just keeps what will fit in the car. What doesn't fit gets donated. So that's a pretty good way of keeping things light. That's like one of the comments way back a few episodes was, I can't remember your name. I'll have it. I'll put it in here. The family is fixing up a van, a big bus, an old bus, converting it and going to drive around the country living in the bus. So talk about editing. Whatever can fit in a car, it's really editing your life down. T. Vernon also said that when it comes to like not producing waste, trying to simplify, just to focus on say one or two areas of waste reduction. That kind of keeps it more manageable, and then you see a really big difference. That is good advice, and that is what I've been trying to do. I appreciate that advice. No kitty. Sorry. Plastic bottles was something I realized we have a lot of. I did try going to like a carton creamer. I didn't like it. From the one that comes in a plastic bottle. And my son is talking about making protein shakes that are natural, like actually make them himself instead of using powders that come in big plastic bags. I do have another question for you guys. I know that making things yourself and in bulk can save on plastics and packaging. But when you get your supplies, say you don't live in a big city, say I'm going to make some of my skincare using oils and different organic things or vitamins, MSM, say, to make for a cream or a facial oil. A lot of it comes in glass, which can be recycled, or plastic. How do you guys deal with things that you have to order to make things in bulk? My husband watched a video on someone who only created, I need to link y'all this for y'all. It's like a mason jar, a big mason jar worth of trash in one whole year. And a lot of the way they did it was going, say they want tortillas, they go straight to a local store to get tortillas. Of course, if you really want to do waste-free, you can ride your bike or walk, and you get your tortillas there. So they go and right to the source for everything, rather than go to a grocery store and stick all the veggies in a plastic bag. And they went to places, say farmers markets, where they could put their vegetables and things in whatever container they wanted. That's something I noticed. Like when I go to the grocery store, there's no option but plastic bags for your vegetables. I don't think they would take kindly to us using something else, but I thought of trying. We can bring bags for sacking our groceries. And say like going to a coffee shop, a lot of them, I think all of them now will let you bring your own cup, so I can do that too. But some of the plastic packaging, I'm still not sure how to get around it, especially for skincare things I make in bulk and or vegetables at the store. I'm just wondering what your solutions are for that. So, a lot of you have taken slow living to heart a long time ago, and you're letting me know about it. And I just wanted to kind of share with everyone here. You can always read these things in the comments, but kind of some portraits of slow living and what it can look like for different viewers. Sally has moved into a small cottage on Lake Michigan, I guess from a city in a larger home. And there she has time to wood carve, sew, knit, make native crafts. She also loves oversized sweaters like I do. I don't really know where Sally came from and what time in her life she's at. I know some people, they save and they plan when they retire to do this kind of thing. But I'm also intrigued by people who do it young, like at a time where most of us wouldn't be thinking. We'd be thinking about upgrading, bigger, 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 everything. They just skew all that and do it. So the Cincha said she had to slow down due to illness, which a few others viewers have mentioned they had to for the same reasons. But now that she's there, living a slower paced life, she would never go back to the way things were. She makes crafts for a summer shop that she has open. I'm guessing it's kind of like a pop-up shop or like for a craft fair that runs in the summer. And I just thought what a inspiration that is for others who are facing the same thing. Rosamond, I hope you don't mind my saying this here because you had shared it on Instagram and you are a viewer. And you may have even shared some in earlier comments on other episodes. I've been backed up reading my comments and answering. But I feel like you wouldn't mind my sharing that after getting diagnosed with chronic fatigue, Rosamond had to start slowing things down, and it's a real disappointment to be diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I've had been told I have Epstein-Barr, and that's my problem, which everyone with chronic fatigue has Epstein-Barr, but most people have Epstein-Barr, so it's kind of a catch-all. The truth was, I might have had an active Epstein-Barr episode happening at the time, but it didn't have to. My life was completely stressful, just awful stress. My personality was one to take on more stress than I needed, but on top of that, there were just a lot of things, chaotic things happening. We had to move. My husband lost his job. It was just a lot of hard things. And that diagnosis was like, where do I go from here? But Rosamond has started slowing down, take a deep breath, and say, okay, well, I'm here. Let's make the most of it. And is finding, I think that you're finding hidden joys and living slower. Though I'm sure there's disappointments. There are things you thought, hey, I was going to get to live this way and do this. There are new things to find now. And one of the things she's enjoying is the knitting community. So watching podcasts, knitting. She knit her first shawl. I'm inspired by you, Rosamond. I'm inspired by, and please comment here if you don't mind, tell us a little more about it. Some of the things that you found, hidden blessings in a disappointing circumstance. Adina and Birch Point are both headed to Maine, where they plan to, Birch Point had already said that she was downsizing big time, or right-sizing, remember? Adina is also doing that, and for her, Adina said that slow living is her brass ring. I like that way of saying it. It's a goal. I'd mentioned Caroline before, that she and her husband had a family business, and just due to changing technology, the internet, the business closed. And so they had to take different jobs. They went ahead and moved into a smaller home, and at first it was very, I'm sure, sad and disappointing to leave like your family home you raised your children in. Thinking she said it was a 3-story home, very large. But along the way, she has found all sorts of blessings, and she loves her life now. And I bet, Caroline, you wouldn't go back if you could. She actually sent me a picture that I'm going to show here on Instagram of her enjoying her slow living. And one of the things she does is rides a trike with like a kind of like a basket in back. She rides a trike, and this picture is of her riding it with her children years ago, and now with her grandchildren. She's found that the job she had to take is actually less work and much less stress. She has more time with her husband and her whole family. She has more time to make things and be creative. There's less stress. They have less to take care of because they did downsize where they live. And they eat fresh food from like a local farmer's market, which she can ride her bike to. So she's getting lots of exercise, fresh air. Everything just sounds really good for her body and her sense of well-being. So I'm really inspired by those of you who are finding these things, especially when the circumstances at first are not what you wanted, and yet you find all these hidden blessings. Sam Reed said that, and I'm guessing Sam is for Samantha, she spent 3 years living in the city, but planning to transition to a rural farmstead that her husband had inherited. So this would require some big changes and some sacrifices. The job that they were both in as librarians, it wouldn't be something that you could be constantly upwardly mobile with in the smaller community. They would take pay decreases immediately, and it's going to cap out. It's not going to constantly grow, promotion after promotion. I'm saying librarians. It's somewhere in the library field. I think librarian covers a lot. They had less stuff to move, but they have a lot of time together outdoors. They are excited. In those 3 years they were planning this move, they were visiting this farmstead every chance they could just to be outdoors and in the nature, and they love it. And so rather than going to the supermarket and debating, do I put these vegetables in a plastic bag, they go and forage their own mushrooms and berries. They're growing their own food. And she encouraged me to try that because, the warm weather in Texas, it should be easy. It's actually not been easy for me, but I also didn't constantly tend my garden in the last, say, 4 years, 5 years. I struggled to grow veggies for that reason, but I'm back to tending it, so we'll see. They learned, it sounds like, most of it from books. Is that true, Sam? Because that's pretty cool. Most of the time people learn from a family member or someone else. I'm wondering what your age is when you made this move. Because my husband and I have been talking a lot about, do we want to live where we are forever? We really don't. I like being here for relatives that are older, but we would love to live someplace where, woods, mountains, especially woods, someplace where you can walk out your front door and just go for a walk or a run and you're right there in nature. Not necessarily walk out your front door and get hit by refinery fumes, I'm not complaining. I wanted to be where I am right now for various reasons, but not forever. So as we think about, we're mid-40s, that's a kind of a big decision to make right now. I'm just curious what your age was when you made this transition. Torhild said, okay, this isn't about downsizing necessarily or right-sizing or any of that, but it was super encouraging to me because as I think about making changes at my age, I've considered, do I want to go back to school? I don't know. She went back to school and is now in her 50s, about to be a first-time kindergarten teacher. I love that. I found that so encouraging. And what experience you'll have to bring to teaching younger children. Because so many of our teachers, they start kindergarten age, a lot of them, and they're very young themselves, and maybe have young families. But, as we age and see children up through growth, even grandchildren sometimes, I don't know, there's a whole different approach to younger children. If you've got the energy and the love for that age, which you must to be doing this, I just think, wow, what a blessing to this kindergarten class you're going to be. And it just encouraged me. It's never too late. So Sarah is, hi Sarah, is my friend from BSF that I think I mentioned in the first podcast. I said, I know of one woman who knits, and that she had worked at a local yarn store that I thought had closed, but they actually haven't. She's set me straight on that. Sarah has found the podcast and has been commenting, and I just love seeing her here. She said that she's been slow living for a long time. She just didn't call it that, She was slow living before slow living was cool. It started, when her children were young. Like me, she had gone to La Leche League, and La Leche League is great about encouraging you to be family and people oriented. I think I titled an episode People Before Things. That was a big La Leche League motto. They give you permission to not get caught up in your culture's ideas of status and what you need to have and what you need to do, but to make your priorities people and what's best for them, and even yourself at times. So she said through La Leche League, she learned a lot about raising a family, and they just kind of embodied that attitude, that very natural, loving, calm, family-centric attitude. She mentioned Whole Foods for the Whole Family, which is the La Leche League cookbook. It was compiled years ago by different members, and it focuses on whole foods. I still use that cookbook too, and she does also. I mean, there's something I make. It's like a North African curry, beef curry. That's the one I still make, and everybody asks for it. We all like it because some of the toppings on it are like pineapples and peanuts, and it's just really good. So, yeah, she's still using that cookbook, but that cookbook was a big deal. La Leche League was a big deal. I learned a lot about feeding myself and my family well. I learned about expectations for your children. The book that got me in that library was something about the high need child, is what it was called. I think it was a David Sears book. He's a really good doctor, and he writes a lot about child rearing and raising children. He had this one child that cried a lot and seemed to need more. And rather than calling it the fussy baby, he called her the high need child. Her need level was higher for whatever reason. She was very sensitive. My daughter had allergies that we didn't recognize. She probably had ear infections is what it was, that the doctor wasn't catching. And that's why she cried a lot. But her needs were higher. And everyone around me is like, cry, let her cry it out. Don't hold her all the time. But everything in me said that's not right. And the Leche League gave me the permission to listen to my gut and do what I believed I should. And I've always been thankful for it. So that is what Sarah's family life was like. Very slow. And then one of her children seemed to need extra schooling, so she homeschooled. And that further slowed things down and kind of pulled them back, insulates the family a little from certain societal pressures. I didn't homeschool, but I do recognize there's value in that other than just meeting a specific need. There's some good points, like a lot of the pressure to have certain things, do certain things, keep up with these activities. You just don't face it when you homeschool. She is now also right-sized. They've moved to a smaller home, and she's enjoying that. And actually is not working, and is going to focus on BSF and spending time with her grandchildren. I'm just compiling lots of comments all in one. So these are, to me, were just great portraits of slow living. Those of you, it's you guys, how you're doing it. And you're very inspirational to me. So we talked about getting outdoors and moving, and that was a question I asked you in episode 9. Obviously Sam with the farmstead and Caroline riding a bike everywhere and buying her vegetables and foods for that day fresh. They're getting a lot of that already. Foraging for your mushrooms and berries, that's getting some good outdoor time for sure. Lindsay from A Wooden Nest was saying that she just needs it daily, and she's made it her goal. Even if it's raining, they get outside, and she often, on her podcast, you can see her with her daughter. They spend a lot of time outside. They have chickens and the garden and a nice little backyard. So it's not really about like exercise, it's about needing nature, needing that time. A little side note, Lindsay had mentioned that what I had said about thinking, there seems to be this current and with podcasters, like you have to use the newest yarns, colorways, and have, the trendiest finished objects and have a finished object every week. Like there's pressure to it. She said she has sensed that pressure. She's felt it, but she's resisting it. As am I, Lindsay. As am I. I think I'll be soon embarking on knitting the oldest and least heard of patterns ever. Because I have so many pattern books I want to get something out of. The Cincha had mentioned on that subject that it's not about lots of finished things and trends. It's about an artful atmosphere. And I appreciate that. And I think Lindsay has definitely captured that with her podcast. An artful atmosphere, for sure. So, rain or shine, Lindsay's outside. Jane is the same way. You've been walking your kind of your worries away. I don't know that it's worries, but you've just been kind of having a funk, and she said she's just walking her way out of it, spending time outdoors. Pammy and Sarah and Jen are all making the effort to get outside at least an hour to 2 hours every day. Some of it is intentional exercise, like running or walking or bike riding, because like Jen loves to run. I like to run too. But what it was Teresa was saying, there's also what the Japanese call maybe nature bathing. For her, that's what she finds necessary. It's just the getting out in the nature. And I think that's kind of what all of us are sensing. Pammy has been riding her bike on errands, just saving her errands to do on her bike, kind of like Caroline. So these are things I'm trying to do also, is to be outdoors as much as possible. Katinka of RizzaKnits Creations, and if you haven't watched that, Katinka is like over the top, fabulous seamstress, dressmaker. She just makes so many good things in her Instagram. I'll link her Instagram, or maybe I'll flash it here. Her Me Made May is, it's been so good. She makes so many good things. She does really hard work in her yard. Like, she just finished removing some trees, just regular yard work, which my husband actually does. We don't have a lot of yard work to do, other than the garden. It's just mowing. But, you know, mowing would be time outdoors, and I can do that too, although I think he really enjoys it. It's his time outside, you know. But Katinka was saying that she moved those trees, she worked in her yard, and she was stiff and sore, but felt so alive, so wonderful. I like that feeling too. I love it when I plant my garden. It's usually, I'll repot my plants on my patios and then do the garden. It's usually 2 days of super hard work over a weekend, and I love the way I feel when it's over. Carmen has been spending time outdoors, but it's not her first impulse to do. Like, she could stand and do things inside all day, but her husband likes to be outside, so she's doing it for him and for her family. But she's always glad she did it, and it's really good family time, and it makes her feel really good after having done it. But Sarah and Birch Point both mentioned the heat is a factor. So Sarah's having to wake up super early to get her time outside. And I live, you know, where Sarah does, so I get that. But I do like to be out in the heat, as long as I acclimate to it. And Birch Point was asking, how can you run in the Texas heat? Well, I love the way it feels. I like that feeling of just getting out and doing something and giving it your all. You know, some people like that rush. However, I've been having headaches every time I get out in the heat recently. So I don't know if it's a hormonal thing or what, but I've quit running for a little bit, and I'm going to see if the headaches stop, because then I'll know it has something to do with overheating or blood vessel dilation, or I don't know. So my moving, here's what I've been doing. I told you several times, I mentioned Katie Bowman's Nutritious Movement website. She's got a podcast called, I think her podcast is Move Your DNA. I know that she has a book that I bought called Move Your DNA, and I've been reading it. It's really good. So far, I'm not quite halfway through. Just lots of facts to back up why moving is the most important thing you can do. Eating is important too, eating good foods, but just like your body needs certain nutrients and vitamins, it needs certain movements. It's not enough to just say, okay, I sat at my desk all day or on the computer, and now I'm going to run really hard for 2 hours. That doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. What she says, this is going to get really geeky here. Mechanotransduction is a process of our cells sensing and reacting to mechanical signals created by our physical environment, like the way we move, our position, gravity, and they adjust to it. So say if we use extra weight to do something, that changes the load on our cells. If we move a certain way, if we slump, if we, all of it, sitting all day, it creates a load or a lack of a load to certain areas of the body. The cells aren't stimulated there. So they're not changing, things aren't strengthening to meet your needs. So she did mention a lot of people with headaches have tight interior body, like the back of their legs, their hamstrings, their calves might be tight, and everything is shifting and adjusting because they sit in chairs all day. Everything in their body is adjusting, and it ends up affecting all the way up the spine to the head. I've been trying the calf stretches more. It's not helping with the headache problem for me, but it's interesting. So all of these things, like our movements, they place different loads on our cells, and they need these movements, all different sorts, like nutrients, because it doesn't just happen that, okay, let's say I just sit and I do this with weights, and I get my heart rate going really high. That doesn't exercise the whole body. That doesn't affect anything but the cells being used to stabilize my trunk and to move my arms, my heart moving. So she talks about, like, rather than the heart being what pumps the blood through the body, that actually has more to do with movement, actually creates like a suction in an area. Say like when you walk, blood vessels dilate, and it kind of like opening a valve, and they pull in the blood to that area. Those cells there are fed the oxygen, and they have like a cytoskeleton around. This is getting so scientific, and yet I don't really quite know what I'm saying. The cytoskeleton around the cells, rather than the nucleus controlling everything, this like outer cytoskeleton on the cells, it reads this information. The pressure's put on it, and it sends signals, like changing our DNA. So it's kind of that use it or lose it concept. I don't have a great grasp on the science of it, but I'm sold. I can see that. Movement heals so many things, and I learned that way back when I was doing Pilates and yoga. I know for me, there are things I can't easily eat or metabolize. Like I'll break out. You might can see, I had like 4 giant cysts on my face after I came back from Iceland because I ate dairy. It was really good dairy, but I ate that and a lot of wheat, and I'm getting back to normal now, and they're going away. But when I walk a lot, I didn't walk as much as I thought I would in Iceland. Those things don't affect my skin. It's like my body can handle and metabolize lots of stresses, problems, foods, all of it. So anyway, our affluent diseases like cancers and things like that, they don't happen in countries where people are having to work hard and move hard to feed themselves. That's just from the sitting. It's from technology. The more stuff like our dishwasher we have to do things for us, the less we move. The less we move, the more our body starts having these problems. It starts responding like somebody that doesn't need that movement, and we develop diseases and things. So I've personally been I've been thinking about the time when I felt best in my life. I've always looked back on that in terms of what I eat. I just ate really fresh, wholesome foods. Lots of vegetables, mostly. Some fruit and, a little bit of protein, but I didn't go over the top with it. I didn't eat sugar. So, and I didn't do caffeine, not really. I always think, I felt so great back then. But the truth is, I didn't really think about the component of movement. I had a young child, and I played with her big time. I mean, we learned through play all the time. We learned etiquette, social situations through playing. We did things outside, squatting down on the ground, digging, rolling around, crawling. We played pretend. I was moving all sorts of ways every day, and I really didn't exercise a ton. It was all just moving, with carrying also the weight of a child. So, I don't know. It was all interesting. And in the book, she talks about modern hunter-gatherer societies and how most of their movement is just moderate, yet it's so good for their health. It's interesting. And for those of you who don't like the idea of some hard workout, you don't like the idea of your heart rate getting up, I just love being exhausted. I do. After I do something physical, I just find I want more. But if you don't feel like that, you don't like that, that's not really necessary for health, according to this book. So Move Your DNA is a pretty good book. So anyway, I've taken time to sit on the floor again, like I used to. I've been working in my garden, so I'm squatting down, pulling weeds and doing things. Like Carmen, I sit on the floor when I'm knitting, because when I knit, it's usually for a 2-hour chunk of time. Or Lindsay, standing to knit. I vary it. I used to sit on an exercise ball sometimes too before the cat popped it. I take more breaks also than I was from knitting. I don't just I've got 2 hours, let me see if I can finish this 2 sleeves, no. I get up, I stand, I do something, sweep the floor, whatever. And even when I clean, I'm cleaning things more thoroughly. I'm making it more purposeful movements. So it's affected me that way. I've also, I've tried to go barefoot in the past, and I did, but then the standing all the time or sitting, driving my grandparents' places, my arches started to fall. That wasn't working in a stationary position, but I'm back to doing that. Walking outside barefoot is really good for your feet. They have to be flexible and move all sorts of ways, and talk about a mechanical response in your cells. It's really good for your body and your alignment. Another thing I've thought about is I run, I bike, I walk, I do martial arts type stuff in my garage, which that one is really a lot of strange movements. I mean, it's not just the same old punching and kicking. It's all kinds of like Brazilian stuff I try and put in there. But I was asking my husband, can we pull out the badminton set? That would be fun to do. And then in the summer, we can go hiking at the woods that are closest to us, the Big Thicket or Village Creek. We can camp and we can canoe there. I always like doing that in the summer. And then there's roller skating. So there's lots of different movements I can do. One thing I wanted to share with you guys, on her podcast, she had a man named Ben Popjoy, and he had actually been inspired by her years before. He lost about 100 pounds walking. He wasn't doing it for weight loss. He was doing it because he just didn't feel good. He didn't feel healthy. But he did lose like 100 pounds just walking. He got up to a point where he was doing like 60 miles a week. I mean, a lot of walking. But he said as he walked around his city, he saw things you wouldn't see in a car. It slowed down his perspective on things. He saw people in need, and just little things, sometimes humorous things, sometimes sweet things, that when you're moving 90 miles an hour in a car, you don't see it. So he started making sandwiches and bringing them and giving to people in need on his walk. And so it became like an outreach thing. And, Sam was talking about foraging for her food and harvesting her own food. He didn't really need to do that. I think he lived in an apartment. He had a good job. He sat much of the day. So he made up for it by what he did in his off time. He prepared food for other people and brought it to them. I just found that really wonderful. So his employer was really, I'll link to this episode too on her podcast, really supportive, and he organized events like charity fun runs, that kind of thing. But his most recent endeavor is called Democratic Movement. And what you do, because right now in America, we are very polarized. Maybe it's everywhere. But lots of knee-jerk, angry, chip on our shoulder. Everybody is ready to battle, ready to rumble over politics and other social issues. We're not good at listening anymore. And we never want to consider, and this is the real thing that bothers me, nobody ever says they're sorry. No one ever says they're sorry anymore. We always have to be right, never bend. And truly, when you say you're sorry, people are like, yeah, you are sorry. You're seen as weak. But that's what we live in, this environment. And he devised this thing called Democratic Movement, where it's like like a coffee club. You go and you get a free latte, and you are paired up with someone you have never met, and you walk together for 2 miles. And on the sleeve of your cup, there's some questions that you ask. And I don't know that they're political at all. They're personal questions. They're just outlook, life questions. And for 1 mile, walking out, you ask the person the questions and you listen to their answers. Then coming back, you get your turn and they just listen. And it's just to encourage people to slow down, not be angry, but just listen to one another. I found that interesting. And so a comment she made was that sometimes getting outdoors can reframe how you see a situation. It can help when you're feeling angry, frustrated with someone. Same old battle, same old locked in. Often we're in front of a computer and we're hunched, and our whole body posture is not good for us. It's not good for our heart. we're getting bad hormonal signals. But getting outside and stretching and moving in ways you're supposed to, it can relieve actual physical stress and also relieve the stress in the issue. And she had mentioned, like, when people start to argue, go outside for a walk. Get outside together and see if you don't find some solutions or see things differently. I wondered if you guys had ever tried that. Just have ever noticed that getting outside, well, Lindsay, you've said, I think, that it helps you reframe your day. Just getting outdoors, seeing something different, moving, taking a breather. It totally has for me. You hear on shows, I need to go take a walk or walk something off. It's real. So I wondered what new things you might have considered when you were outside recently. Maybe take this week, and when you do spend your time outdoors, if you notice you're considering something you never had, or just considering a different perspective, or somebody else, their thoughts, maybe make note of it and comment if you would. I'll do the same. So, speaking of new things, I've just talked a lot. There is a designer whose patterns are so interesting. The shape is very different from me. It's Junko Okamoto. I have never knit one of her patterns. There's like rug. This is a free pattern, by the way, on Ravelry called Rug. Plum is the one I want to make. However, I'm looking at my yardage now. I'm thinking I really need one more skein. I don't know why I didn't get 5. I'm thinking I didn't because that's all that they had. And I'll explain that in a moment. This is plum. You see the color work? It's a strange fit, though. And not strange. It's just a really oversized, slightly cropped fit. And it's a one-size pattern. So I love it. It's very different for me. And that's why I wanted to try it. It's just something new. Let me show you 2 more of her patterns. This one I hadn't noticed till the other day. It's called Meg. Also oversized. So those of you who like oversized will appreciate these. Look at the cables on this. Just lovely. Let me see if I can find a better full shot. The fit is just great because it's not fitted. That's why it's great. I just love things I can move in. So what I did was I joined a crowdfunder for Moeke yarns. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. I don't hear anyone talk about most of these things, so I'm guessing on pronunciations. It's a dress. It could be a tunic, and some people have made it into a sweater, but it's called Pam. Do you see that? Really cute. Really oversized. I adore it. This one's more tunic-like. So, it's Junko Okamoto, and she's got several of these. So, I'll have a link for Moeke. I don't know if that's how you say it. Yarns. It's Iona. It's a Romanian company. And Iona crowdfunder, and with a donation for helping them expand their mill. And now they're doing a new dye vat because they're in demand. That's why, like I said, 4 skeins was all I could get. And I thought I can maybe eke this sweater out, just make sure it's cropped, you know, maybe make the sleeves not so long. The Elena yarn is the kind I got. They have a few types. It's a very, I don't know if you can see how rustic it is. It's almost got a thick and thin texture. The way it's like a single, and the way it's spun, and it's got a nice sheepy feel to it. So it's half breed Tige wool. I'm not sure what that is, what kind of breed. In their crowdfunder, one of the prizes you could get, like prizes, was a pattern. And I got Pam from Junko for doing that. But I had this yarn, this Elena yarn, to make plum for a while. And this is the summer I want to do it. I want to do something different. And Elena, the story behind it is Iona went to their grandparents' home, which her parents had now inherited, and had spent many summers there. Her grandparents would watch them, her and her brother. And she found a bag full of yarn similar to this that her grandmother had spun. It was very, very traditional. And she and her brother began talking about the wool industry there in Romania. The farmers couldn't find a market for their wool. They would just burn it. And a lot of the traditions were being lost. And they were thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could open a mill and produce wool like this and keep the traditions and the breed-specific wool tradition alive. And so that's what they did. And that's why their business started very small. And they created this yarn in a traditional way, using traditional Romanian breeds to make it without chemicals, spun in a traditional way. And they named it after their grandmother, Elena. So they want to expand their business to meet the demand, because I got this from Tolt Yarn and Wool. It's hard to get a hold of this yarn, and that's why I think I'm just going to combine them with some Cloudborn Black for the yoke design. So would you guys like to try a Junko pattern with me? If you do, you can knit along with me. It's just an informal thing. It's not a prize-driven knit along. It's just to share our thoughts on this different construction, different idea, a one-size-fits-all type pattern, I guess depending on how you knit it. And I would like to hear your thoughts on it if you try it along with me. So I'm thinking Junko, June and July type knit along. And maybe I'll have a hashtag. If I'm the only one that does it, I'm cool with that on Instagram. It's okay. But there is, like I said, at least one free pattern on her site on Ravelry Rug. And a lot of these are for worsted and sport weight. So, and like I said, the fit is very forgiving. All different sizes of people knitting it, and it's so oversized and cropped, it's working for everyone. So join me if you want for this Junko in June and July knit along. So I know some of you are doing new things. Rosamond had done a new shawl, her first shawl. Cassandra is going to start broadening her knitting horizons from just dishcloths to her first garment for her daughter. And so if you have any recommendations for Cassandra, please leave them in the comments. I know Tin Can Knits has all these great patterns that everyone talks about knitting for their nephew, niece, child. So that might be something to think of. But you might, Cassandra, want to try doing something on your own. You know, I've knit sweaters before that it was with a pattern, but it was just a rectangle for the front, a rectangle for the back. You sew them together or up to a point, and then right here where the sleeve is, you've got one long rectangle that you sew down the inseam, the inside of the sleeve, and then connect, you know. So basically 4 rectangles makes a sweater, a drop shoulder, slightly oversized, say sweater. But you may want to do something not so high pressure, if that feels like pressure to you, to try and invent your own sweater. But you know, Carmen said she was doing that and she finished it. She let me show you the picture of the sweater she finished, and it's not a simple drop shoulder. It's interesting, and I'm going to show that now so you can see. And that's what she knit in like no time, just like a couple of weeks it seems like. sitting on the floor doing her knitting. So, all right. That's all I had to say. If I'm rush, I'm sorry. And if I talk too long, sorry. And if I sounded like I'm all into science and biology with that move your DNA, sorry, because I'm not. What new thoughts has your time outside brought to you, or new perspectives? Or have you thought on somebody else's perspective that you hadn't considered before? Please tell us in the comments. I'm interested to see how we are affected by a change of scenery and being out in nature, how our perspective changes. Also, are you trying anything new for the summer? I've got the sewing. I've got the Junko pattern with a new yarn I've never used before. And her pattern is totally new to me. I'm also going to try to make some jewelry with some stones and different little knitting notions I have. And someone online has a shop that sells knitting notions that can be jewelry. Really pretty. I can't think of her name. Bed of Roses is her name on Instagram. So it's Catherine. That's her name, Catherine. But she's also got the individual stitch markers and things if you want to create your own jewelry, which I think I'd like to do. I have some things already that I could use, and I would like to use some of hers. And I'm doing another dog training class with our biggest dog, because she's been very assertive and she needs to be, she needs to know who's boss. I'm going to do a rally dog training class. I think it's the kind where you run alongside your dog and you get him to go under and over and jump things, and I don't know. I'm excited to do it in July. So tell me what new things you're doing this summer, and tell me if you've had any new thoughts or perspectives, or considered something you hadn't before, or just spent some time considering something you still don't agree with, but it's different from your thoughts because you were outside. And I will talk to y'all next week after graduation. I'm still kind of sad about it, but I've had all these dreams like he's still a baby. And that's been kind of hard to wake up and he's not a toddler.